දවස් 30ක්ම unlimited Netflix බලන්න. unlimited data pack එකක් මුළු පවුලටම unlimited fun එකක් අරගන්න. අදම active කරගන්න.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, only the best for Sri Lankans. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo promises sovereignty and economic prosperity in Sri Lanka's choices between democracy and authoritarianism in discussion with Indivariya Muatta on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24.
There ought to be sovereign nations and free peoples get a chance to live the lives they want. Want to be here to share that message and know the United States stands ready to do all that we can to recognize Sri Lanka's sovereignty.
Sovereignty not for sale. President Gotabaya tells US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that he will never sacrifice the country's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity. District lockdown. Police impose curfew over the entire western province until Monday as day goes by with no new COVID-19 deaths. Zero tolerance. Police warn that social distancing violators in public areas will be arrested by undercover police personnel. All this and much more coming up on this Wednesday, the 28th of October 2020.
Nava sunlight sakura. Then dikukal pavatina sakura mal suandin.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. In an exclusive interview with Indivariya Muatta on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, before his departure, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo stated that the United States stands ready to do all that it can to recognize Sri Lanka's sovereignty, but it needed to make a difficult but a necessary choice between democracy, freedom and making life better for the Sri Lankan people. Pompeo added that the Millennium Challenge Compact is just one of many US offerings that Sri Lankans can choose not to accept if they want to, and that the US will not show up with debt packages that a country cannot possibly repay. The US Secretary of State said he expects Sri Lanka to make the right choices and end up in very dynamic, powerful partnerships that benefit both countries.
Great democracies like the one that we have here in Sri Lanka and the one that we have in the United States have a shared vision for how life ought to operate and how there ought to be sovereign nations and free peoples get a chance to live the lives they want. Want to be here to share that message and know the United States stands ready to do all that we can to recognize Sri Lanka's sovereignty. It was a great visit, both the meeting with the president and with the foreign minister and his team. There's many opportunities, things that we can do. Sri Lanka will have to do its part. It's got to be welcoming. It's got to have the rule of law and transparency so that American investors will want to come here. But it'll be really good for the people of Sri Lanka. There'll be jobs and opportunity and wealth creation and all the things that democracies in the private sector can do.
What exactly are these difficult decisions or choices that the US expects Sri Lanka to take?
Yeah, I know precisely the things that Sri Lanka needs to do, but more importantly, the Sri Lankan people know and the Sri Lankan leadership. Look, this isn't about America imposing its vision on Sri Lanka. Quite the opposite. It is Sri Lanka sharing with America the things that we can do to make life better for the Sri Lankan people here. Those are the choices we hope that Sri Lanka's government makes. When it does, there'll be opportunity, there'll be good partnerships, not only with the United States, but with the other democracies in the region, whether it's South Korea or Australia or Japan. These democracies have the opportunity to work together. And so I'm confident Sri Lanka will want to be part of that.
Does this mean the US will respect Sri Lanka's wishes to remain a neutral country and not be entangled in the geopolitical power play?
It's about choices. Every country makes choices. The choices will be, do you want democracy and freedom? I'm confident that the Sri Lankan leadership does exactly want that. And when you choose those things, you end up with different kinds of partners. You end up with partners that actually respect Sri Lanka's decision-making as a sovereign entity.
What will happen if it is politically challenging for the Sri Lankan government to enter into the MCC agreement?
It's one of many things that's been proffered. If it doesn't make sense for Sri Lanka, that Sri Lankans will choose not to accept that. The relationships, the strands, the depth and complexity of our relationship far exceeds any one transaction or any one opportunity. There'll be plenty. We'll work closely on on them alongside the Sri Lankan government. What America offers almost always is companies and private investment, partnerships and friendship. That's how we roll. We won't show up with state-sponsored enterprises. We won't show up with debt packages that a country can't possibly repay. We won't attempt to use that debt to extort actions by the government. Those are two very different models. One is the model for democracy and freedom. The other is a tyrannical authoritarian model. We're convinced that the people of Sri Lanka will make the right choices for themselves.
Safeguard hand sanitizer. නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නිරෝගීමත් දිවයකට.
The Government Medical Officers Association says that in order to prevent further spread of the virus and more deaths, health officials in affected areas must educate the residents of the high risks prevalent in the area, as it will be the only way people will act with responsibility. Meanwhile, a blanket curfew will be imposed on the Western Province from midnight tomorrow until 5 a.m. on Monday, the 2nd of November.
The National Operations Centre for Prevention of the COVID-19 outbreak announced today that a curfew will be imposed on the Western Province from midnight tomorrow until 5 a.m. on the 2nd of November. On Monday the 2nd, the curfew will be lifted only in areas that are not currently under curfew. Areas currently under curfew will continue to stay under curfew until further notice. Accordingly, since the curfew will go into effect from Friday, essential food items and pharmacies in areas currently under curfew will remain open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. tomorrow. After Monday, the 2nd of November, food stores and pharmacies in areas where curfews were previously imposed will remain open for 2 days a week. Meanwhile, a total of 211 COVID-19 infections were confirmed in the country today. Yesterday, however, a total of 457 COVID-19 infections were detected. The Department of Government Information stated that out of them, 447 have been identified as those associated with the patients from the Palyagoda Fish Market cluster, while the remaining 10 are from quarantine centres. As the number of coronavirus cases continue to rise, the total number of infections attributed to the Minuwangoda Apparel Factory cluster and the Palyagoda Fish Market cluster currently stand at 5,398.
දවසකට මරණ 3ක් කවදාවත් අපේ වෙලා තිබුණේ නැහැ පහුගිය අවස්ථාවවලදී. මේක යම් බැරෑරුම් තත්ත්වයක් විදිහට අපි හැමෝම විග්‍රහ කළ යුතුයි. ඒ වගේම යම් අවදානම් අඩියකට අපි හැමෝම මුහුණ දීලා ඉන්නවයි කියන එක අපි තේරුම් අරගෙන කටයුතු කළ යුතුයි. විශේෂයෙන්ම අවදානම් කණ්ඩායම රැක බලා ගන්න ඉදිරියේදී අපි හරි ක්‍රියාමාර්ග වලට ගියේ නැත්නම් මරණ සංඛ්‍යාව අසාමාන්‍ය ලෙස ඉදිරි මාස දෙක ඇතුළත වැඩි වෙන්න ලොකු ඉඩකඩක් තියෙනවා. ඒ තත්ත්වය දැනටත් අපිට වළක්වා ගත හැකි මට්ටමේ තමයි තියෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා විශේෂයෙන්ම රජයේ වෛද්‍යාරිංග සංගමයේ විදිහට සෞඛ්‍ය බලධාරීන් ඉල්ලනවා. මේ ප්‍රදේශයේ තියෙන අවදානම් සම්බන්ධයෙන් නියම අවදානම ජනතාවට ලබා දෙන්න. එතකොට තමයි ජනතාව වගකීම් සහගතව හැසිරෙන යම් පෙළඹීමක් ඇති වෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා අපි මේ තොරතුරු හරියට කළමනාකරණය කරලා අවදානම sannivedanaya කිරීම මේ මොහොතේදී අත්‍යවශ්‍යයෙන් සිදු විය යුතු දෙයක්. ඒක වගකීම් යුතු පාර්ශව විසින් සෞඛ්‍ය බලධාරීන් විසින් සිදු කළ යුතු දෙයක් විදිහට අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා.
In the meantime, a fish trader at the Madampe fish market in Kahavatta was confirmed with the COVID-19 virus yesterday. The patient was immediately hospitalized when it became evident that he had come into contact with a patient from the Palyagoda Fish Market cluster. Meanwhile, with the patient's son sitting for the GCE advanced level examination today, measures were taken to arrange a special exam space for him at the examination centre at the Godakavela Kaluratna Central College under the health and safety regulations. In another development, a driver of the mayor of the Panudara Municipal Council who had visited the Palyagoda Fish Market has tested positive for the virus. As a result of this, measures were taken to temporarily close the Panudara Municipal Council. Meanwhile, an army civilian employee residing in Vadua has been diagnosed with the COVID-19 virus. A hospital spokesperson revealed that he had undergone PCR tests at a different location and visited the Nagoda General Hospital in Kalutara to receive treatment for a minor illness. After testing positive, measures were taken to transfer him and to disinfect the ward he was treated in. Health authorities stated that investigations will be conducted to ascertain as to how he had contracted the virus. Elsewhere, 4 residents of Berola and Kalutara have been diagnosed with the COVID-19 virus. They were identified as those associated with the Palyagoda Fish Market cluster. Thus, measures were taken to direct 35 of their close contacts to self-quarantine. In other developments, following PCR tests conducted on 30 persons from Kegol identified to be associated with the Palyagoda Fish Market cluster, 8 of them were confirmed with the virus today. They are residents of Alapalavala, Kurundupana, Unnugoda, Meedeniya and Abanpitiya. In another development, a resident from the area of Kotagala in Hatton was hospitalized after being confirmed with the virus. Health authorities said that before he was diagnosed with the virus, he had visited 2 liquor stores in the area. Accordingly, the 2 liquor outlets were sealed today and its employees were quarantined. Meanwhile, a person who transported fish to the fish market in the area of Valimada has contracted the virus. Health authorities stated that he had gone to Kaduela and Paliagoda to buy fish. The 61-year-old had also reportedly visited a liquor store in the area. In other developments, a resident of the area of Watagoda in Kotagala, who is also an employee at the Paliagoda fish market, has been diagnosed with COVID-19. Associates of the patient from 10 families were quarantined. Elsewhere, 73 traders and consumers in the area of Jayala and Kandana, who visited the Paliagoda fish market, were hospitalized last night after they tested positive.
More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back in more news. Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva urges the public to avoid panic buying since the curfew that will be in effect in Western Province from midnight tomorrow will be lifted next Monday. In the meantime, police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana says that those found violating social distancing in any public place will be arrested and prosecuted by police personnel in civis.
A meeting to discuss the steps to be taken to provide efficient public essential services was worked off last evening at the Temple Trees under the patronage of the head of the Presidential Task Force on Economic Revival and Poverty Eradication, Basil Rajapaksa. During the meeting, Rajapaksa instructed the officials of the institutions in the essential service sector to develop a framework to provide uninterrupted services including the supply of gas, water, fuel, transportation and health services in the current scenario. Attention was drawn during the meeting to the provision of a bag of essential goods sufficient for 2 weeks to each family placed under self-quarantine. Furthermore, it was also decided to provide the 5,000 rupee allowance to the people residing in the areas under isolation. Meanwhile, SLPP parliamentarian Sahan Pradeep Vitana stated that a sum of 2.42 billion rupees has been approved for the distribution of families in quarantine in the Gampha district.
අපිට ගම්පහ දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ නිරෝධායන පවුල් 4,84,000කට කෝටි 242ක් අවශ්‍යයි. ඒ කෝටි 242 ලබා දෙන්න මේ වෙනකොට අවසරය මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශය හරහා ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා. 8 වෙනිදා මධ්‍යම රාත්‍රියේ සිට ඇඳිරි නීතියට ලක්වුණු ප්‍රදේශවල ජනතාවට දෙවනි අධීර යටතේ මේ මුදල් ලබා දෙන්න කටයුතු කරනවා.
In another development, chairman of the Lanka Southasa, Dr. Nushad Pereira, inspected the Southasa outlet at the Economic Centre in Narayanpeta.
බස්නාහිර පළාතේ ඇන්ද්‍රනීතිය පැනෙව්වට සතෝසා අලෙවි ජාලයේ සියලුම ශාඛාවක්ම විවෘත කිරීමට අපි මේ අවස්ථාවේදී සංවිධානාත්මක ලෙස වැඩ කරගෙන යනවා. ඒ නිසා අපි මේ බය නැතුව කියන්නේ ආහාර ද්‍රව්‍ය අත්‍යවශ්‍ය ආහාර ද්‍රව්‍ය තියෙනවා සතෝසා ජාලය තුළ. ඒ නිසා අනවශ්‍ය ලෙස ආහාර ද්‍රව්‍ය එක්රැස් කිරීමට සූදානම් වෙන්න එපා. ලංකා ලූණු වල මිල වැඩිවීමක් අප දක්නට ලැබෙනවා. ඒ නිසා දැන් ආනයන කරන ලූණු තමයි අපි ලබා දෙන්නේ. අලවල අඩුපාඩුවක් අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම තියෙනවා. අපි රජයෙන් දීපු මිල අනුව සීනි කිලෝ 2ක් රුපියල් 85කට ලබා දෙනවා. ටින් මාළු වල රුපියල් 200ට ලබා දෙනවා.
In the meantime, Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva had this to say on the possible panic buying.
බස්නාහිර පළාතට ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වන නිරෝධායන ඇඳිරි නීතිය දෙවෙනිදා උදෑසන 5ට ඉවත් කරන බැවින් අනවශ්‍ය පරිදි බඩු එක්රැස් කර ගැනීමට හෝ කලබල වෙලා විශාල වශයෙන් බඩු ලබා ගැනීමෙන් වළකින්න කියන එකත් අපගේ ජනතාවගෙන් කාරුණික ඉල්ලා සිටිනු ලබනවා.
අපි හෙට දිනේදී විශේෂයෙන්ම කොළඹ ආශ්‍රිත ප්‍රදේශවල වැඩිපුර පොලිස් නිලධාරීන් සිවිල් ඇඳුමින් යෙදවීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. යම්කිසි ආකාරයකින් පොලිමක හරි යම්කිසි ස්ථානයක වෙළඳසැලක් ඉදිරිපිට ඖෂධ සැලක් ඉදිරිපිට දුරස්ත භාවය තබා ගන්නේ නැතුව යම් කිසි කෙනෙක් හිටියොත් ඔවුන් අත්අඩංගුවට ගැනීමට අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම සිදු වෙනවා. ඉන්පසුව ඔවුන් නිරෝධායන ක්‍රියාවලියට යොමු කරලා ඊට පස්සේ අධිකරණ ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගැනීමට ශ්‍රී ලංකා පොලිසිය පසුබට වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
Taking the current pandemic situation into account, a decision was made to close the economic centre in Meegoda until the 2nd of November. Accordingly, the stock of essential goods at this centre was brought to the economic centre at Narayanpeta, Ratmalana and Bokundara for sale. Meanwhile, the Ceylon Electricity Board stated that uninterrupted electricity will be provided to customers throughout this period.
විදුලි බලය අපි සැපයුවට ගොඩක් අයට මේ වෙලාවේ ආර්ථික ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම විදුලි බිල් ගෙවීමට යෑමේ අපහසුතාවයක් තියෙනවා. ඒක හින්දා අමාත්‍යතුමා අපිට උපදෙස් දීලා තියෙනවා විදුලි කප්පාදුවක් කරන්න නැතුව මේ දවස්වල අඛණ්ඩව විදුලි සැපයීම කරන්න කියලා. ඒ වෙනුවෙන් අපි පැය 24 පුරාම විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ සේවක මණ්ඩලය කටයුතු කරගෙන යනවා. ගෙවල් වල ස්වයං නිරෝධායනයට ලක් කරලා හරි ලොකු රිස්ක් එකක් තියෙන තැන් වලට අමතරව තියෙන ප්‍රදේශවල මනු කියවීමත් සාමාන්‍ය පරිදි කරගෙන යනවා. සියලුම සෞඛ්‍ය ආරක්ෂිතකම පිළිපදමින් තමයි මේ කටයුත්ත කරන්නේ.
In another development, State Minister of Vehicle Regulation, Bus Transport Services, Train Compartments and Motor Car Industry, Dilum Mamunugama, stated that steps have been taken to formulate a new transport policy for public transport activities during the COVID-19 pandemic.
කොයිඩ් ප්‍රවාහන ප්‍රතිපත්තිය අපි සකස් කරන්න මම අපේ අමාත්‍යාංශ නිලධාරීන්ට බාර දීලා තියෙනවා. අපිට ඒකට ඇතුළත් කරන්න වෙයි කොයිඩ් ප්‍රවාහන ප්‍රතිපත්තිය නම් සීට් එකක් කර සීට් එකක් මගින් ගෙනියන්න ඕනේ කියලා. එතකොට මගියාගේ ආරක්ෂාව ඒකේ තියෙනවා. එතකොට බස් ගාස්තුව කීයද කියන එකත් අපිට ඇතුළත් කරන්න වෙයි. මොකද බස් හිමියව සීට් එකක් කර සීට් එකක් මිනිස්සු ගෙනියන්න කියලා පරණ තිබ්බ මුදලම ප්‍රවාහනය කරන්න කියන්න බෑ. සමහරක් වෙලාවට කොයිඩ් තත්වයක් යටතේ වෙනම ගාස්තුවකුත් කොයිඩ් තත්වයක් නැහැයි කියලා ප්‍රකාශ කරපුවාම වෙනම ගාස්තුවකුත් වගේ දෙයක් අපිට ඇතුළත් කරන්න වෙයි. ඩීසල් සහනයක් ගැන එයා ඉල්ලීමක් කෙරුවා. ඒ පිළිබඳව අපි හොයලා බලනවා. ඊගාවට ඒක සාමාන්‍ය තත්ත්වයටපත් වුණාම අපිට පුළුවන් ආපහු සාමාන්‍ය ප්‍රවාහන ප්‍රතිපත්තිය අනුව ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවා නම් ගාස්තු සහ ආසන ප්‍රමාණය ඒ පළාත්වල වෙනස් කරන්න අපිට හැකියාව ලැබෙනවා.
In the meantime, the National Medicine Regulatory Authority requests pharmacy owners to deliver medicine to customers in curfew-hit areas. Meanwhile, steps were taken by police to disinfect the police barracks, police stations and flats in the areas of Colombo. In another development, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, Professor Upul Disanayake, stated that around 500 PCR tests can be conducted daily at the university in support of the health sector. Meanwhile, with curfew about to be imposed in the Western Province from midnight tomorrow, Commissioner General of Examinations Sanat Pujitha stated that the advanced level candidates will be able to reach their examination centers without any obstacles.
In one of your headline-making news, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today after arriving in the island last night. At the discussion, Secretary Pompeo assured the President that the United States is ready to continue working with Sri Lanka to achieve its economic development goals. President Rajapaksa told Secretary Pompeo that he will never be prepared to sacrifice the country's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrived in the island at around 7:35 last night on a special U.S. Air Force flight. The U.S. Secretary of State and his delegation were received at the airport by State Minister for Regional Cooperation Taraka Balasurya. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called on President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the Presidential Secretariat this morning. The U.S. Secretary of State has stated that he is ready to continue working with Sri Lanka to achieve the economic development goals. The Secretary of State also stated that his country's objective is to further develop the existing strong bilateral relations between the two countries and that high priority will be given to the promotion of U.S. investment in Sri Lanka. At the meeting, the President explained Sri Lanka's new foreign policy and pointed out to the U.S. Secretary of State that it was based on neutrality. President Rajapaksa stated that he will never be prepared to sacrifice the country's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity.
More revelations were made during the Presidential Commission of Inquiry probing the Easter Sunday attack yesterday, during which CCTV footage of locations frequented by the suicide bombers were released to media. The owner of a house in Panadura from where the bombers set off for their deadly mission also testified before the commission. The Presidential Commission of Inquiry probing the Easter attacks yesterday heard evidence from the owner of a house located along Paratta Road in Sarikamulla Panadura, which was rented and used as a safe house by Easter attack mastermind Zahran Hashim. The owner of the house, ASM Ilham, testified that Mohammad Azam Mohammad Mubarak, the individual who rented the house, claimed to have been engaged in footwear manufacturing and that he, his friend, their wives and 3 children intended on occupying the house. Accordingly, on the 13th of February 2019, the owner of the house had handed over the keys to Mubarak after obtaining a 12-month deposit payment of 480,000 rupees. He told the commission that Mubarak has not been home on the 2 occasions that he visited the house 1 month after renting it out, and instead Rizkan, the signatory for the rental agreement, was the only person present at the house. The witness added that at around 4 p.m. on the day of the Easter attack, a Muslim youth had approached him at a shop in the area and told him that his house has been surrounded by the army and warned him to flee the area. He added that despite this, he visited the house and had identified him to the investigators as the house owner by producing his ownership documentation. The commission then summoned the CID investigator who conducted further investigations into the house, Woman Chief Inspector of Police Nalini Dissanayake. Inspector Dissanayake said that when she inspected the house the day after the attacks, she found several boxes containing cycle ball bearings, batteries, battery boxes, diagrams of electric circuits, and a tub of bleaching powder. The inspector also revealed that during investigations, the CID discovered a number of bills that revealed other locations used by the bombers. She added that the bills led to the police to find CCTV footage of 2 of the terrorists who had entered the Gorakana supermarket on April 10th last year. At around 8:17 am, Mohammad Azam Mohammad Mubarak, who detonated the bomb at the Kingsbury Hotel, and Mohammad Hassoun, who carried out the attack on St. Sebastian's Church in Katuwapitia, were seen entering the supermarket. The suspects also made a purchase from a shop in Battaramulla on the 11th of April. The inspector also revealed that the terrorists had bought 10 50-litre backpacks from the shop, and in addition they also purchased 36 other items worth 76,650 rupees, including slippers, sunglasses and t-shirts. The officer further added that Mohammad Azam Mohammad Mubarak, who carried out the Kingsbury Hotel attack, was a loyalty card holder at the store where the goods were purchased. Another bill revealed that Hassoun and Mubarak had been to a Muslim-only shop in Grand Pass on the 18th of April last year and had bought 8 shawls worn by the men known as Rumal Amjad. They had spent 21 minutes at the shop after entering it at 2:09 p.m. Hassoun and Mubarak are then seen wearing these shawls in a video made by the terrorists a day before the Easter attack. Investigations have also revealed that the suicide bombers had left for their missions from the house located at Paratta Road, Panadura. The CID officials said that Zahran Hashim and Mohammad Ibrahim Ilham Ahmad had departed the house in Panadura on the 20th of April at around 7:13 p.m. and entered the Shangri-La Hotel at around 7:57 p.m. The Cinnamon Grand Hotel bomber Mohammad Ibrahim Insaf Ahmad and Kingsbury Hotel bomber Mohammad Azam Mohammad Mubarak had left the house in Panadura one day prior to the attack at 8:12 p.m. and reached their targeted hotels. Meanwhile, the Commission has decided to suspend its proceedings considering the spread of COVID-19 in the country. We return after this short commercial break. Don't go away.